No, my job is I'm a campaigner and I'm supposed to provoke debate and discussion. And sometimes that involves saying things which are considered to be controversial. But what the papers have done, I think, is they have predicated their argument on a number of fundamental misunderstandings about what happened. First of all, the way it's written, it's like all these hundreds of head teachers were sat there waiting for me to come in and tell them what to do. That's not what the conference was. It was head teachers who came together to discuss ideas on best practice. And I talked about gender in the context of an hour-long speech around mental health and a section about language and how our language impacts our ideas about ourselves. Second of all, they've made it about individual students. Now, I was saying I go into 3 schools a week and I tend to walk into a year assembly. And I was saying in that particular context, I don't walk in and say girls or boys because I don't like to make assumptions about people. So instead I say students because I would rather acknowledge that we're all human and we're here to learn together. And thirdly, what they've done is they've conflated sex and gender. Sex lives between your legs, gender lives between your ears. There is no doubt that people are born either male or female with a small number who are born intersex. But what's happened is we've created these ideas about what men on average are like and what women on average are like, which are usually based on truth. But over time, they've turned into this is what men should be like, this is what women should be like.
So stereotypes.
And those stereotypes can be incredibly damaging to mental health, and that was the point that I was making.
So what was the reaction of the teachers that were in the room and heard the full hour?
Nobody thought that it was in any way controversial, which I think tells you something. I started going into schools about 10 years ago, and I work with year 9 and above, so that's 13 to 18-year-olds. And I would always steer away from saying girls. I would always call them ladies because I didn't want them to think that I thought that they were children. I found it slightly patronising to say girls. I found it sort of a put-down. It established boundaries.
We had someone on the other day who didn't like the term ladies. It sort of,
right.
They had feminist issues with that.
Exactly. So schools that I'm going into have said, can you not call them ladies? Because either because they find it patronising, they've got issues with it just like your guest, or because some of our students are transgender. Can you just call them students? Now, it's those schools and that practice, and I've seen it work on the ground, and the pupils love it. You know, it's pupil-led. It's those schools that I'm following where they've led, actually. Right. This is not my idea by any stretch.
Don't you end up with the issue? I mean, there are no greater advocates of diversity you know, than Holly and myself, and understanding and compassion, but we have to put the other side of the discussion. Yeah. What happens if a teacher makes a mistake? So if one of those... So this then becomes part of the school vocabulary. Yeah. You know, a teacher has been working for 30 years in school, have a very specific way that they teach the pupils, and they make that mistake. And these are the circumstances that then we read online and then we read in the papers that someone gets absolutely trounced because they called someone girls or boys.
Well, this is symptomatic of exactly the same problem that I began by saying, that the papers tend to turn this into a binary issue. All we're asking people to do is their best. And in my experience, most parents and most teachers are doing their best. But what they also want are new things to try because their children, in a lot of instances, are struggling. Now, campaigners like myself, and a lot of teenagers indeed, are grappling with really complex social issues, and the media should get involved in that. But if they do, they have a responsibility to not present it in these binary ways.
If we're doing it in schools using this language, if we're doing that, surely then we should be doing this in adults in the workplace. Otherwise, what you're doing is creating an unrealistic future for these kids, because they'll come out of school and they'll be like, hang on a minute, somebody's using a pronoun that is feminine. Well, I'm shocked and outraged by that. But actually the rest of the workplace doesn't do that because we don't. So when does it start? I mean, does it start when you give birth and somebody says, oh, it's a baby, because I can't say boy or girl because, you know, we don't want to put anything, we don't want to offend anybody, we don't know yet this baby might transition at some point. Where does it start, where does it end, or is it just something now that we have to have everywhere?
OK, so everybody's feeling in the dark on this because this is a relatively new thing. This is a spotlight that's being shone on an issue that's been kind of underground for a very long time. But here's my idea. Yeah. There are a lot of people like Robert Webb, for example, like Caitlin Moran, who are doing some fantastic work at trying to redefine what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl, and to make it more broad and inclusive. So eventually, hopefully, those words will lose those oppressive connotations and negative stereotypes that can cause children anxiety. In the meantime, let's just broaden out our language, make it a little bit more neutral, so that if I say, well, you know, man up, or you're a boy, or you're a girl, there aren't any of those invisible expectations which are maybe damaging children.
So in answer to Holly's question, you have a baby and you say, oh, it's a boy, or oh, it's a girl. Better not say that because you might offend the nurse.
No, I don't. I think that that's perhaps taking it to an extreme. But, for example, a few of my friends have had babies recently, and I did find it very difficult to find a card that wasn't pink and sparkly for a girl or blue for a boy. And that's already indoctrinating them, I think, into certain archetypes and certain ways of thinking.
So how do you teach biology in schools then, when you're actually learning about male and female? How does that work? Because then, if you've got to do it that way, because that's the way anatomically it currently is, then what happens further down the line when you actually blur the boundaries?
Well, again, this is about understanding the difference between sex and gender. Okay, so your sex is your anatomy and your biology. Like I say, that there is a male and female gender, but whilst that is binary, human beings are not. Human beings exist on a spectrum. And what I don't like is we can say men on average talk less than women. That's true. That's fine. It's fine to say that. But what we shouldn't be saying is, therefore, men should not talk.
Surely it's not a language thing then, isn't it? Just being accepting of whoever wants to live their life however they are without judgment. So instead of just changing words and languages and whatever, just say, that's fine for you. You do whatever you like and I'll do whatever I like and let's never judge each other.
Well, language is incredibly important. And part of the talk that I did was talking about how 90% of our brain's capacity is unconscious. So we're constantly drinking in information and that creates narratives and beliefs and ideas which affect the way that we feel about ourselves. So we do need to think about language.
The reason we're discussing this is because you were delivering your keynote speech, but you were delivering it to the Girls' School Association annual conference. They're going to have to change their name?
That's a discussion for them to have. I would welcome it. If they thought that it was damaging them in any way or damaging their membership in any way and they wanted to try, I would welcome having a discussion about that.